The IDF announced over the weekend that it had eliminated the head of the ISIS branch in the Gaza Strip, as the political echelon of Israel reiterated that there is no point in talking about a partial deal and made plans to move forward with the military maneuver in Gaza City. Intelligence assessments in Jerusalem and in Washington have concluded that no breakthroughs are expected in negotiations in any time soon, as Hamas continues to make absurd, maximalist demands. And in a related story, the notorious spokesman of Hamas, Abu Obeida, was eliminated in an IDF strike over the weekend, while the remains of two hostages who died in captivity after being kidnapped on October 7th of 2023, Idan Shtivi and Ilan Weiss, were recovered. To Israel's north, Lebanon is facing an unprecedented crisis, while to the south, the IDF confirms that its strikes in the Sana'a neighborhood on Friday resulted in the elimination of Houthi Prime Minister, as well as additional senior officials. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth about what's happening in Israel. So the Israeli Air Force launched a strike in the El Bureij area in the center of the Gaza Strip over the weekend, which resulted in the elimination of the head of the ISIS Gaza branch. Also, Hamas spokesman Abu Obeida was eliminated in a precision strike assisted by the Israeli security authorities and military intelligence. So we'll bring you the full report. And amidst all of this kinetic activity on the ground in Gaza, Egypt informed the Americans over the weekend that Hamas is not willing to talk about ending the war under the terms that Israel demands, and is making some absurd demands of their own. We'll have all the details about this for you. And in the northern arena, IDF forces conducted a series of nighttime operations in southern Syria over the weekend, arresting terrorists who were advancing terror activity against our troops. And next door in Lebanon, there are growing signs that the National Army and what's left of Hezbollah are on a collision course, and the land of the settlers should soon be a new civil war. And to the south, the IDF confirmed on Sunday morning that in the strike on Yemen's capital of Sana'a on Friday, Ahmed Ghaleb el-Rawahi was eliminated alongside additional Houthi senior officials, including those who were in key positions and responsible for forced employment and military buildup. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will bring us the details about the operation in which Israel ruled out a plan against Iran that the whole world is talking about. It included hacking and tracking the phones of the bodyguards of senior Iranian officials, nuclear scientists, and IRGC generals, which allowed Israel to target them for elimination in the opening hours of the conflict. However, Iran also has tricks to play, including a cyber attack which hid in plain sight. A new report by the Israeli company Dream Security reveals that Iran ran a sophisticated phishing company via compromised diplomatic mailbox, aiming to spy on the ceasefire talks in Cairo and to harm diplomatic missions around the world. So, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 695 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the authority of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we start, I want to invite you to keep spreading the truth, share, and also follow us. We at Boots on the Ground are working day and night to bring you all the information about what's happening in Israel. So, in order to support the work, you can hit that subscribe button, or you can hit that donate button in YouTube and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we'll start with the news from the Gaza Strip. Over the past week, the IDF struck and eliminated the head of the Palestinian province of the ISIS terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip, the terrorist Mahmoud Abd al-Aziz Abu Zubeida, in the El Bureij area. Al Zubeida held the most senior position of the ISIS terrorist organization inside Gaza and was responsible for setting policy, planning and executing the organization's courses of action in the region, including in the Palestinian Authority-administrated areas in Judea and Samaria, as well as inside the Egyptian Sinai Peninsula on the border with Israel. Although it was not received much attention in the media, ISIS took an active part in the fighting against the IDF forces inside Gaza, importing weapons and also money from all over the region. It might continue with this activity going forward, but they'll have to do it without Abu Zubeida. And in a related story, the IDF and the Israeli Security Authority, led by the Southern Command and directed by the military intelligence, carried out an airstrike on Saturday evening on a building where the spokesman of Hamas's military wing, Abu Obeida, was staying. According to the army, prior to the strike, many steps were taken to reduce the chance of harming civilians, including the use of precision munitions, aerial surveillance, and additional intelligence. However, there was also some bad news over the weekend, as an IDF Namer APC ran over an explosive charge in the Zaytun neighborhood in the southern part of Gaza City on Friday. One soldier was moderately wounded and 6 additional soldiers were lightly wounded, and they were all evacuated to a hospital for medical treatment, and their families were notified. 5 of these wounded soldiers had been released from the hospital by Saturday morning. And meanwhile, the army is trying to press the hundreds of thousands of residents of Gaza City to move south ahead of the launch of Operation Gideon's Chariots B, and an Israeli official told the Associated Press that soon the aerial airdrops of aid over Gaza City will be halted and the arrival of humanitarian trucks will be reduced. However, it is not clear when the move will begin, although AP noted that in recent days, the near-daily airdrops of aid over the city have ceased, and on Saturday, the IDF announced the cancellation of humanitarian pauses in Gaza City. Alongside these reports, Gaza City municipality is warning of a severe humanitarian situation in which hundreds of thousands are crowded into the center and the western parts of the city. And at the same time, Hamas is trying to frighten the residents by telling them there is nowhere to go, arguing that in the south there is no available space. The terrorist organization, which this week launched a campaign to prevent residents from leaving the city in the northern parts of Gaza so that they will serve as human shields, claimed that from here one lives only to heaven. That's according to their campaign. And meanwhile, Palestinian reports indicate that airstrikes are continuing on Hamas positions in Gaza City amidst the ground operation over the weekend, which resulted in the recovery of remains of 2 Israeli hostages who have been kidnapped into the Gaza Strip on October 7th of 2023 and died in captivity. The remains were identified as belonging to Idan Shtivi and Ilan Weiss. And here's the story of the complex operation which led to the recovery. Idan Shtivi was abducted from the Tel Gamma area, and later he was murdered by Hamas after he acted to evacuate and save others from the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. He was only 28 years of age. Ilan Weiss, a member of Kibbutz Be'eri, was abducted from his home on October 7th of 2023 by Hamas terrorists, and later he was murdered. He was 55 at his death. His wife, Shiri, and their daughter, Noga, were also abducted and were returned under the first ceasefire agreement to release hostages on November 2023. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in the fighting in the Gaza Strip. So keep spreading the truth, share, and click that subscribe button so that you remain aligned with what's happening in Israel in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now, we're keeping our focus on the Gaza Strip, but switching slightly from the military situation to the humanitarian situation. The IDF's and the defense establishment's preparations for the move to conquer Gaza City continue, but they are apparently not progressing at the pace that was expected. Assessments in the defense establishment are that so far, during the past 3 weeks in which the IDF has been operating on the outskirts of Gaza City, only about 10,000 Gazans have moved south from that area out of approximately 1 million people who will have to move eventually. To date, Israel has allowed the entry of more than 3,000 family tents and other shelters in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, with 1,000 more tents purchased by aid organizations and are expected to enter next week. And meanwhile, over the weekend, the United Arab Emirates inaugurated the new line that supplies water from the Emirati desalination plants in Egyptian territory to El Mawasi area in the south of the Gaza Strip and extends for 7.5 kilometers. It is expected to supply 15 liters of water per person per day. Now, I want to stay in the topic of humanitarian situation, but not in the Gaza Strip, rather in Israel itself. It might sound overdramatic to some people to speak in these terms, but I've lived in Israel my whole life, and I've never seen so many people in so much trouble. And I don't think it's an exaggeration. That's because as this war winds down a little bit, life here in Israel hasn't just been about physical recovery. It's about people trying to rebuild from the ground up. So many hard-working Israelis, including bakers, artisans, small shop owners, and others, had their lives turned upside down. Some were called to reserve duty, others had to leave their homes because they were under missile and rocket fire. Many of them lost months of income almost overnight. Now they are trying to start again to reopen their businesses, restock shelves, and get back doing what they love. But it's not easy, and they need help. That's why Arza exists. Arza partners directly with these small businesses, buying their handmade goods and delivering them in beautiful boxes to your houses around the world. So each box helps real families get back on their feet and puts money in the hands of those working hard to recover with dignity and not with charity. So guys, if you want to be part of this effort, go to www.arzabox.com/TBNIL and use the coupon code TBNIL to get 10% off your subscription. Again, that's arzabox.com/TBNIL. One box, one family, one step closer to rebuilding. Now, we're getting back into the news, as the Political Security Cabinet will convene on Sunday evening for a dramatic meeting centering on approving the IDF's plan to take control of Gaza City. This comes after last week the Cabinet convened in incomplete composition and did not discuss the Gaza issue at all, but dealt with security briefings. A political source clarified ahead of the discussion that only the military plan will be on the agenda and not the issue of the hostages. The source added that if there is a deal, it will be for all the hostages, the living and the fallen alike. The cabinet already approved on August 8 the outline for examining the operation in Gaza, but the Sunday evening will focus on approving the detailed plan, including timelines, force deployment, and enter systems and other coordination mechanisms. According to the published briefings, the entry phase into the city is expected to last several months and will include a humanitarian effort to establish compounds in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, a graded evacuation of civilians, full encirclement of Gaza City, and finally, a ground maneuver accompanied by airstrikes. In parallel to the diplomatic preparations, the IDF has exempted Gaza City from localized humanitarian pauses and defined it as a dangerous combat zone, which is another sign that the campaign is approaching the decisive phase. According to assessments, Israel already controls about 75% of the Gaza Strip's territory, and the conquest of Gaza City is perceived in the IDF as a decisive step that will bring about the collapse of Hamas's combat capabilities. All of this is proceeding because in Jerusalem and in Washington, they assess that there will be no breakthrough in the coming days in the contacts for a ceasefire and a deal to release the Israeli hostages. Egypt informed the Americans recently that Hamas is not willing to talk about ending the war under the terms that Israel demands, including its disarmament and removal from power. Furthermore, Hamas is making its own demands in order to agree to the negotiations to end this war, including a prior Israeli commitment to fully withdraw and the remaining of armed Hamas forces to maintain order during the reconstruction period. An Israeli political source commented on these developments, saying that the military pressure that led Hamas to accept most of the Witkoff framework is the only factor that will force Hamas to further compromise and reach a deal. And meanwhile, the Americans assess that Hamas, despite the erosion of its rule and despite the heavy fear of the Israeli military operation, still hopes that the international pressure and the internal dispute will stop this offensive. During the week, a consultation is expected between United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's team, Israeli Minister for Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer, and the Israeli team to discuss ways out of this impasse. Now, we'll move on to the IDF strike in Yemen last week. On Thursday evening, reports emerged that the Israeli Air Force had once again struck in Yemen as part of Operation Lucky Drop. Precise intelligence had reached the IDF's intelligence directorate earlier in the week to the effect that senior officials in the Houthi regime were preparing to meet in order to watch together the speech of Houthi leader Abd el-Malik al-Houthi. With the location of this gathering in mind, a formation of fighter jets set out for Yemen from Israel using a ruse that allowed the aircrafts to reach Sana'a, the Houthis' capital, which is 2,000 kilometers from Israel, in secrecy, and to strike with at least 10 munitions the building in which the Houthi senior officials had gathered in. Inside the building were believed to be at least 10 senior figures of the Houthi terrorist regime and also its political ranks. Houthi leader Abd el-Malik al-Houthi was not the target of the strike, but also in the building with high probability was the Houthi chief of staff Muhammad al-Omari, as well as the Houthi defense minister and the interior minister. The IDF confirmed on Saturday evening that in the strike the Houthi prime minister was eliminated, and alongside additional senior officials that were with him. The official statement went on to declare that in the infrastructure were senior officials responsible for force employment, the military buildup of the Houthi terrorist regime, and the promotion of terror schemes against Israel, in addition to Houthi senior officials in other key positions. The strike was made possible by exploiting an intelligence opportunity and a rapid operational closure of the loop, which took place within a few hours. The situation assessment regarding the results of the strike continues, including checking the presence of additional senior military commanders. The IDF will continue to act decisively to remove any threat to the citizens of the State of Israel, as it is acting and will continue to act in the Gaza Strip and in the other arenas. Earlier, the Houthi presidency in Yemen announced the death of Prime Minister Ahmed Raheb el-Rawawi and a number of senior ministers. The announcement stated that other ministers were wounded, some in serious condition and others moderate. In the announcement, the Houthis threatened that the blood of the martyrs constitute fuel and a driver for the continuation of our path. Guys, what do you think about all of this? Will this devastating blow to the senior leadership just make the Houthis more dangerous? Let me know what you think in the comment section. In any case, it was also reported that the Houthis launched a wave of arrests against suspects in collaborating with Israel and in distributing photos or information about the strike, while publishing severe warnings against any reporting on the Israeli strikes. Guys, here at TBN Israel, we will proudly disregard these warnings and continue to report on every development in this issue. And we invite you to be part of the team as you keep spreading the truth, share and follow it. It really helps us every time somebody hits the like, leave a comment and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And now we will move on to the story about yet another legendary IDF commando operation, this time in Syria. During a series of night operations in southern Syria over recent days, forces of the 226th Brigade under the command of the 210th Division and in cooperation with the field investigators of Unit 504 completed the arrest of a number of terrorists who were engaged in promoting terror activities against our forces in southern Syria. During searches that were carried out by the forces, weapons were located in the areas in which they operated. The IDF spokesperson's office issued a statement that Division 210 forces continue to be deployed in the area and are working to thwart attempts by terror elements to entrench themselves in the region with the aim of ensuring the security of the citizens of the State of Israel. The official confirmation comes after reports that surfaced in recent days about an exceptional operation inside Syria, which included the landing of Israeli forces, allegedly following the discovery of munitions, installations, and other military facilities in the El Kisawah area, not far from Damascus. According to foreign sources, the operation took place during diplomatic contacts between the regime of Abu Muhammad al-Julani and Israel regarding a security agreement. The Syrians reported unusual ground activity, and contrary to the trend in recent months, the IDF this time preferred to return to partial ambiguity until today's announcement. Guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development, and now we will move on to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will bring us some insights into reports coming out of Iran of massive internal unrest and Israel's efforts to assist the Iranian people in freeing themselves from this evil regime. Mati, over to you.
Thank you, Yair. Now let's talk about two very dramatic developments that are taking place with the Iranians. The first one is the automatic snapback mechanism that is falling into place in just a really short amount of time. And the second one is a New York Times expose on how the Israeli Mossad was able to track and eliminate so many Iranian executives during the June war. So let's take a couple minutes and break down these very dramatic developments that are taking place with the Iranians as we speak. Let's start with how Israel was able to track and pinpoint the location of Iranian officials during the June offensive against Iran. So here's a report that has come out. The New York Times has been reporting that Israeli officials through the Mossad were able to track the Iranians by using, and listen to this, the location of their bodyguards and not the officials. Because well before the June attack on Iran, the Iranian government preemptively told its leading officials and those who expectedly would try to be targeted by the Israeli defense forces, they told them to stop carrying around their cell phones so they wouldn't be able to be tracked. But what they forgot to do is take away the phones and prevent tracking of the bodyguards that were the ones accompanying those officials. So the system sounds like this. The Iranians take away the cell phones and whatever trackable device that would be on any kind of official, but the bodyguard units that are protecting these people continue to carry phones. Not only do they carry their phones, some of them were caught posting to social media in live time based on their current locations, giving away the information on where those officials would be during that attack. The report goes on to say that on June 16th, which is 4 days into that offensive by Israel on Iran, a meeting took place about 100 feet underground or 30 meters in a secret bunker, and this meeting included President Masoud Pezeshkian. And Israel, because of the location of those bodyguards, was able to bomb the entrances and exits of that meeting in real time. Now, no official was killed, but think about the impact. Think about the psychological damage of having the president and top intelligence and other government officials underground in a bunker, and during the meeting that is supposed to be completely secretive, drone strikes or possibly jet strikes from above eliminate all entrances and exits of that meeting. Just get in the head of those leaders for 1 second and imagine how terrifying that is. How much they understand at that moment that Israel has fully penetrated their intelligence organizations, their exact locations in real time. All the while they thought that Israel was unable to track them. And again, the solution is so simple in retrospect, but in real time, I can only imagine how terrified these people would have been. And the report goes on to say that this method was used to eliminate multiple leaders in the Iranian government during that strike. Let me remind you that this wasn't a one-off. there was an ongoing series of eliminations of Iranian leaders, political, religious, nuclear plan related, and IRGC related leadership that all within their homes, their secret hideouts, and even after they fled to what was supposed to be a completely unknown hideout or safe house out in the desert, they were struck from above or by explosive charges. And that shows you the level of penetration, the level of accuracy in the intelligence, and the fact that Israel was able to in real time track these people. Now we can only assume that more information is going to come out, but the reality here is fascinating. Israel was able to use a location of the bodyguards to be able to eliminate the targets themselves. This is an incredibly brilliant moment by Israel, but also an amazing oversight by the Iranian security organizations in allowing their bodyguards, the security detail, to remain those who are leaking the information real time. This is something they should have covered in a true oversight on their end. So that's one big story that relates to Iran. Let's go to the second part. The next big item on the table for the Iranians is the snapback mechanism. Now let me explain what that is. This is a mechanism that, as it sounds, snapback rolls back sanctions, it rolls back bans on export, bans on sales, and freezing of assets onto the Iranian regime and anyone affiliated to it as it's connected to the nuclear program. This was set in place all the way back in 2015 to prevent the Iranians from pushing for a nuclear program. Now, in these years that have passed since then, the Iranians have masterfully avoided, negotiated their way out of sanctions again and again and again. And although there are sanctions that are placed on them currently, they're not sufficient. This arrangement that is led by the E3, which is Germany, France, and the British, the UK, is meant to prevent any kind of external pressure, allowing the Iranians to weasel their way out of the sanctions and the pressure that they are supposed to create. Now, how does this work? The whole idea behind this mechanism is that if the Iranians don't allow the IAEA, the International Agency of Atomic Energy, to fully supervise and scrutinize their nuclear programs, then these countries have the ability to snap back all the sanctions. And believe me when I tell you, the sanctions are painful and expensive to the Iranians. They want to avoid them at every cost, and they've gone through a lot of motions to make it seem like they're trying to sort of counteract those sanctions as they're being imposed on them. They've feinted interest in negotiations. They've attempted to negotiate with the Americans and elsewhere. What we know at this point is that the Iranians are completely uninterested at negotiating away any part of their nuclear program, and they plan to continue until they're punished or physically stopped. Now, much of their nuclear facilities were damaged, and some of their stockpiles of enriched uranium have been damaged, but they still hold a substantial amount of enriched uranium to about 60%, which is what we call a threshold to getting to weapons-grade uranium. More so, they've gone back to trying to renew, rebuild, and reenact some of their nuclear facilities, and they haven't allowed any supervisors to reach the facilities in Iran. And that's why the E3, again, the French, the Germans, the British, are pushing hard for these sanctions to be imposed. Now, behind the scenes, there's a whole additional move that's connected to the American government, where through the foreign ministry, through the different State Department individuals are pressuring, including through President Trump, are pressuring the foreign ministers and the governments of these countries to make sure that when the time comes for these sanctions to be reimposed, bang, they happen in full force. And believe me, the Iranians are terrified of this event taking place. They know it's coming down the pipeline. It's scheduled to take place just in a few weeks in the third week of September. And when that happens, it's irreversible until a decision is made. The way the mechanism is structured is so that other members of the Security Council, the Russians, possibly Chinese, couldn't apply pressure from different directions and prevent the snapback mechanism from taking place. Now, there is a way around this. The Russians, the Chinese, others could buy oil from the Iranians. They could move in funds in a different way. But really, it puts in place a very substantial amount of damage in a very fast pace, in a very dramatic manner on the Iranian government. And they want to avoid that. So as this week sort of kicks off, we're watching the Iranians under an incredible amount of pressure. The imminent threat of the snapback mechanism, and at the same time, the incredible story of how Israel was able to eliminate leaders in the IRGC, leaders in the Iranian government, through the location of the bodyguards. It shows weakness and a poor planning on the Iranian side, but also brilliance on the Israeli Mossad side in being able to eliminate people during that June offensive against the Iranians. Now back to Yair Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani, for bringing clarity to these very interesting times that we are living in. And guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in this issue. So keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, do not forget to hit that subscribe button or that donate button so that we can create more videos, boots on the ground style, from Israel. Now, I need to tell you the story about how quietly and without much public relations, the IDF's intelligence directorate is rebuilding itself and restoring its capabilities in the various combat arenas. Tremendous geopolitical change is taking place across the Middle East, and as the space is being reshaped here, Amman, the Israeli intelligence agencies, stands before dramatic challenges. According to publications over the weekend in Syria, an Israeli commando force was landed at night between Wednesday and Thursday inside a military base in El-Kisawah, north of Damascus, under the cover of airstrikes. According to Syrian sources, the soldiers were at the base for about 2 hours, during which they took possession of a great deal of electronic equipment, apparently systems that were brought to the place by the Turkish army. There has been no official comment on these reports from the IDF or the political echelon, as Israel seeks to maintain the space for plausible deniability and in this way prevent further deterioration in relations with the al-Julani administration or Turkey. A few hours after the activity near Damascus, Israeli Air Force planes struck Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Among the targets were a missile launcher, weapons depots, and other military infrastructure that Hezbollah is trying to rehabilitate. The intelligence directorate has been operating around the clock over the past year to prevent Hezbollah from rebuilding itself, and the IDF's actions are used both in the elimination of almost 300 Hezbollah terrorists and in locating weapon stockpiles and launchers, require precise intelligence and the ability to penetrate the enemy's inner networks across all its arrays and echelons. In large part because of Israel's efforts, Hezbollah is a shadow of its former self. Even 1 year ago today, Hezbollah was considered a major military power in the Middle East, and now they can barely maintain their position inside Lebanon and might even be about to be completely destroyed by the National Army of Lebanon. We'll keep an eye on this story and bring you all the latest developments. And speaking of the latest developments, as I mentioned earlier in the report, at almost the same time as the IDF was carrying out these operations in the northern arena, Air Force planes flew more than 2,000 kilometers from Eilat to deliver a crushing blow to the Yemeni Houthi regime. Most people cannot even imagine the scope of these achievements, even by the historical standards of the IDF's many amazing victories in previous generations. Until about 2 years ago, Israel had not built an intelligence array in Yemen. This is a fourth circle state with no linkage to the tension vis-a-vis Israel. However, from the moment that they began to act against Israel on behalf of Iran, Amman, the Israeli intelligence agency, and the Mossad were required to build a broad intelligence circle almost from scratch. This was very difficult because the situation in Yemen is very chaotic, and even the Houthis are not fully in control of their own territory. So the Houthis managed to survive the war with Saudi Arabia, the strikes by the United States, and also the Israeli strikes. But Israel understands that only quality intelligence that will focus the activity of the centers of the gravity of the Houthi regime's government and military apparatus will carry out a dual move. This will be first and foremost a deterrent vis-a-vis the Houthi regime, but also vis-a-vis Iran and the entire region, and in addition, a punitive step against the heads of the organization that has been challenging Israel for almost 2 years now. Israel has become the policeman of the Middle East, as in any enforcement handling, intelligence has a central part in success. The IDF Intelligence Directorate failed miserably against Hamas in October 7th of 2023. On October 8, the IDF was required to rebuild what had been so powerfully struck, and this has been done in the midst of war on 7 different fronts. The events of the past week prove that this has all been accomplished despite incredible pressure coming against Israel in many different arenas. And guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in this matter. So keep spreading the truth, share, follow us, hit that donate button, and most importantly, guys, pray. Pray for the peace of Israel. Pray for our IDF soldiers that are preparing to enter Gaza City. Pray for the hostages to be released from Hamas control. Pray for all the innocent lives that are affected by these terrorist regimes, and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.